The air shimmered with heat and tension in the underground arena. Dozens of alien species crowded the rusted metal tiers, shouting in languages no human was meant to comprehend. Their hunger for blood transcended any universal translator. Frank Sullivan stood barefoot in the ring chest, rising and falling, blood streaking his weathered jaw. His ribs ached like shattered glass, every breath a stab of pain that reminded him he was still alive, still fighting. Across from him stood a 7-foot-tall female alien with armor-like skin and molten orange eyes that burned like twin suns. They called her Cyrax the Bonebreaker. She was a warrior from the planet Tyrone, bred in gravity 3 times heavier than Earth's. Her kind didn't fight for sport. They fought to test worth. And right now she looked down at the human as though he were a dying animal, something to be put out of its misery. "Stay down, flesh weak," she growled, her voice deep and resonant, like stones grinding together. "You've already lost half your ribs. Another strike will crush your organs." Frank spat blood and grinned through it, the red stark against his gray stubble. "I've been through worse days in the Gulf." The crowd roared with laughter and blowed lust. Cyrax's mandibles flared, a sign of both fury and curiosity. The humans who came to Tyrone were rare, reckless mercenaries or desperate gladiators seeking fortune. But this one fought differently. No armor, no augmentations, just sheer nerve and the grin of someone who'd already made peace with pain. When she lunged again, Frank barely dodged, rolling over the cracked sand floor. Pain flared white-hot through his torso. He was done. One more hit, and it would be lights out. And then she did it, a sharp, brutal kick into his side. The sound of bone snapping echoed through the arena. The crowd gasped, but instead of screaming, Frank exhaled, shuddered, and then, inexplicably, laughed. Cyrax blinked, mandibles twitching in confusion. "You mock death," Frank groaned, pressing a hand to his side where agony had blazed just seconds before. But now the pain was fading, replaced by a spreading warmth beneath his skin. He flexed his ribs experimentally. Solid. Whole. He looked back at her, disbelief mixing with gratitude. "You just fixed me." The arena went silent. Cyrax froze. "I did what?" Frank grinned weakly. "You healed me. Guess your kick hit something right." Cyrax stepped back, unsettled for the first time since entering the arena. "That is impossible. My strikes destroy. They do not mend." "Well," Frank said, standing slowly, dust falling from his shoulders, "either you're terrible at breaking bones or you just saved my life." The crowd murmured in confusion, their bloodlust replaced by something new. Intrigue. Cyrax's gaze flickered with unease. The human should have been dead. Instead, he stood tall, no longer bleeding, no longer broken. The matchmaster's voice crackled through ancient speakers. "By Tyrone law, combat halts if both combatants live after fatal injury. This fight ends in anomaly." The arena lights dimmed and the crowd erupted, not in rage but in stunned excitement. Something unprecedented had happened, something impossible. Frank looked up at the towering alien warrior who minutes ago had tried to kill him and extended his hand. "Name's Frank Sullivan." She didn't take it. Her orange eyes narrowed to slits. "You are no ordinary human." "Neither are you," he said softly. And for the first time in her career, Cyrax felt something she'd never expected to feel toward a human. Curiosity. 6 weeks earlier, dawn broke over the Arizona desert, painting the sky in shades of amber and gold. Frank Sullivan completed his 50th push-up with the discipline of a man who'd been following the same routine for decades. At 65, his body was a roadmap of scars, souvenirs from a lifetime of service. His face, weathered by sun and hardship, had the dignified lines of someone who'd earned every wrinkle. The small cabin he called home sat on the edge of a decommissioned military research facility where he now worked as a security guard. The job wasn't glamorous, but it gave him purpose, something a man like Frank couldn't live without. 20 years as a Navy SEAL had hardwired duty into his DNA. Frank laced up his running shoes and stepped outside. The morning air still held the night's chill, a brief reprieve before the merciless desert heat. His 5-kilometer route took him around the perimeter of the facility, a sprawling complex of buildings mostly abandoned after budget cuts. Only a skeleton crew remained, maintaining equipment and securing decades of classified research. As always, when he reached the eastern fence, a section separated by additional barbed wire and warning signs, Frank adjusted his course. Whatever lay beyond that fence was above his pay grade, and Frank Sullivan had learned long ago that some questions were better left unasked. Still, every morning he found himself glancing at the restricted area, an old instinct from his SEAL days telling him something wasn't right. That night, as clouds gathered on the horizon promising a rare desert storm, Frank made his usual rounds through the silent facility. Lightning flashed briefly, illuminating the abandoned laboratories through dust-covered windows. In that flicker of light, Frank caught movement where there should be none, near the restricted section. He paused, hand instinctively reaching for a sidearm he no longer carried. Another flash of lightning, and this time he was certain. Lights were moving inside the restricted zone. Protocol demanded he call it in immediately, but curiosity held him back. For months he had noticed unusual activity. Unmarked vehicles, specialists he didn't recognize, equipment moved under cover of darkness. Frank reached for his radio. Sullivan to control, possible breach in Section E, going to investigate. The response came back immediately, too quickly for someone who should have been surprised. Negative, Sullivan, maintain perimeter. Do not approach Section E, security team already dispatched. Frank frowned. In 18 months working here, he'd never once seen a dedicated security team for Section E. Copy that, maintaining position. He switched off his radio and moved silently toward the fence. Some habits never died. If there was one thing Frank had perfected in Special Forces, it was how to disobey an order while technically following it. He wouldn't approach. He'd just observe from a distance. The rain began to fall as Frank found a position with clear sight lines to the restricted area. Through his binoculars, he could make out a team of people in hazmat suits excavating something large from the ground. The storm intensified, but they worked with urgent purpose, unconcerned by the downpour. Lightning struck nearby, illuminating their discovery, a metallic object buried in the earth. Not rusty or weathered, but sleek and otherworldly, with curves and angles that didn't follow human design principles. Frank's pulse quickened. In his 65 years, he'd seen classified aircraft, experimental vehicles, and weapons that never made it to production. This was something else entirely. He took out his personal phone and captured several images, then sent them to the only person he still trusted from his old life. Hank Weber, former FBI, now retired but still connected. No message attached. Hank would understand. For 3 consecutive nights, Frank observed the excavation from different vantage points. The object was slowly revealed to be some sort of craft, roughly the size of a military transport helicopter, but like no aircraft Frank had ever seen. Its surface had a liquid quality, seeming to shift even when stationary. The team worked with reverent caution, as if afraid of waking something. On the 4th night, Frank recognized a face among the scientists, younger but unmistakable. Dr. James Harper, son of Lieutenant Michael Harper. Mike had been Frank's closest friend in the SEALs, taking a bullet meant for Frank during a mission gone wrong in the First Gulf War. Frank had carried Mike's body through 10 miles of hostile territory, a debt he could never repay. Seeing his son here involved in whatever this was changed everything. This wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was personal. The team's excavation reached a critical point that night. Frank watched as they uncovered what appeared to be a sealed chamber within the craft. An argument broke out between 2 factions of scientists, one group clearly wanting to transport the chamber to another facility, the other insisting on opening it on site. Dr. Harper stood among those advocating caution, his gestures becoming increasingly animated. Frank couldn't hear the words, but he recognized the body language of someone fighting a losing battle. The senior official, a stern woman in a charcoal suit, made a slashing motion with her hand. Decision made. Lightning split the sky as they prepared equipment to breach the chamber. Frank had seen enough high-risk operations to recognize when proper protocols were being rushed. The fine hairs on the back of his neck stood up. The same feeling he'd had moments before ambushes in territories where Americans weren't supposed to be. The breach happened in an instant. A blinding flash erupted from the chamber, followed by what looked like liquid metal spilling outward. The scientists scrambled back their formations, breaking into chaos. Frank saw Dr. Harper stumble and fall dangerously close to the spreading substance. Without thinking, Frank cut through the fence and sprinted toward the excavation site. Alarms blared, but he focused only on reaching Harper. 2 security personnel moved to intercept him, but Frank hadn't forgotten his training. A precise strike to the first guard's solar plexus, a sweep of the legs for the second. non-lethal efficient. He hadn't spent 30 years serving his country to watch his dead friend's son die on American soil. Harper, Frank shouted, reaching the young scientist just as the strange liquid metal surged forward. He pulled Harper clear, but as they tumbled away, a splash of the substance struck Frank's forearm, where an old shrapnel scar created a break in his skin. Instant fire raced up his arm, pain unlike anything he'd experienced in decades of combat. Security personnel surrounded them, weapons drawn. The woman in the charcoal suit approached, her face a mask of controlled fury. "You have no idea what you've done," she said. Not to Harper, to Frank. The last thing Frank remembered before losing consciousness was the strange warmth replacing the pain in his arm, and the metallic substance seeming to sink beneath his skin like quicksilver, finding its home. Frank awoke in a sterile room that reminded him of military hospitals in Kuwait. No windows, minimal furnishings, medical equipment that beeped with reassuring regularity. He tried to sit up and found himself unrestrained but weak. His forearm was bandaged where the strange substance had touched him, but surprisingly it didn't hurt. The door opened and Dr. James Harper entered, followed by the stern woman from the excavation site. Harper looked relieved. She looked calculating. "Mr. Sullivan," Harper said, his voice carrying the same measured cadence as his father's. "You probably don't remember me." "James Harper," Frank replied, his voice rough from disuse. "Mike's boy. Last time I saw you, you were receiving a folded flag at Arlington." Something passed over Harper's face, surprise then understanding. "You're that Frank Sullivan. Dad talked about you, said you were the best operator he ever worked with." The woman cleared her throat impatiently. "Dr. Harper, perhaps we could focus on the situation at hand." Harper nodded. "Of course, Director Cassidy. Mr. Sullivan, you've been unconscious for 3 days. What happened at the excavation site was unprecedented." Frank looked down at his bandaged arm. "What was that thing? What was in it?" Harper and Cassidy exchanged glances. It was Cassidy who spoke. "That information is classified far above your security clearance." Frank's patience, never his strongest virtue, thinned further. "Lady, that classified information is inside my body now. I think I'm cleared to know what it is." Harper intervened before Cassidy could respond. "He's right, Director, and he's not responding like the others." He turned to Frank. "What we excavated wasn't from Earth, Mr. Sullivan. It was a Tyron scout vessel crashed during a covert surveillance mission approximately 50 years ago." "Tyron," Frank repeated. "You're telling me that was an alien spacecraft?" "First contact happened in the 80s. Harper continued, ignoring Cassidy's glare. "Limited diplomatic relations, mostly scientific exchange. The Tyrans are cautious about sharing technology. What you encountered was biometal, living metal with regenerative properties. We've been trying to study it for decades, but it's highly unstable outside a Tyran host." Frank processed this, decades of classified military operations making the fantastic somehow digestible. "And now it's in me." "Yes," Harper said, "and you're the first human to survive direct contact. The substance should have killed you instantly. Instead, it appears to be integrating." Frank removed the bandage from his arm. Where the substance had entered his scar, faint luminescent lines now spread outward like circuitry beneath his skin. As he watched, they pulsed with a soft blue light. "The hell is happening to me?" he asked quietly. Harper looked genuinely fascinated. "Your body temperature is elevated nearly 3 degrees, but you show no signs of fever or distress. Your white blood cell count should indicate massive infection, but you're exhibiting accelerated healing instead. It's as if the biometal recognized your body as compatible." Director Cassidy stepped forward. "What Dr. Harper isn't telling you is that the Tyrans have been notified of the situation. Their ambassador was most insistent on examining you personally." "Examining me?" Frank didn't like the sound of that. "The biometal is sacred to them," Harper explained. "What we found wasn't just technology. It was a burial vessel containing the essence of one of their fallen warriors. To them, this is closer to a religious artifact than technology." A knock at the door interrupted them. A young aide entered, whispering something to Cassidy. Her expression shifted from annoyance to concern. "They're here earlier than expected," she said. "Prepare Mr. Sullivan for transport." Frank sat up straighter. "Transport where exactly?" The Tyran delegation has landing clearance at our facility in Nevada, Cassidy replied. You'll be taken there for examination. And if I decline this invitation, Frank asked, though he already knew the answer. Cassidy's smile didn't reach her eyes. This isn't a matter of national security anymore, Mr. Sullivan. It's a matter of interplanetary diplomacy. Your cooperation isn't optional. After she left, Harper approached Frank's bedside, speaking in a hushed tone. Listen to me carefully. The official story is diplomatic examination, but I've seen the actual Tyran communication. They use the phrase recovery of sacred essence. In their culture, that typically involves removing it from whatever's containing it. Frank understood immediately. They're planning to cut it out of me. Harper nodded grimly. I owed my father's memory enough to warn you. Whatever happens, don't let them sedate you completely. The biometal seems responsive to consciousness. As long as you're awake, it stays integrated with your tissues. Two security officers entered the room with a wheelchair. Frank allowed himself to be helped into it, his mind racing through options, escape routes, contingencies. Old habits from operations behind enemy lines. Your father saved my life once, Frank told Harper quietly as they wheeled him out. Looks like it runs in the family. The transport to Nevada was uneventful, a sterile medical helicopter with minimal crew. Frank observed everything with the careful attention of someone planning multiple exit strategies, but made no move. Not yet. First, he needed to understand what he was dealing with. Nevada's facility was larger, newer, clearly designed, with non-terrestrial visitors in mind. Ceiling heights twice normal doorways with unusual proportions and subtle architectural elements that seemed just slightly off, as if accommodating physiologies different from human. Frank was brought to a preparation room and given a simple gray jumpsuit to replace his hospital gown. Through the window, he could see an unusual aircraft on the landing pad, organic curves and surfaces that reminded him of the excavated vessel in Arizona, but larger and clearly operational. A Tyran ship on American soil. The world had changed more than he realized during his quiet retirement. Director Cassidy entered with two men in military uniforms bearing generals' pictures. The kind of brass that never showed up unless something was either going very right or very wrong. Mr. Sullivan, one of the generals began, I'm General Westmore Joint Chiefs. This is General Crane's Special Operations Command. We need to impress upon you the delicacy of this situation. Frank nodded respectfully, ingrained military courtesy, but said nothing. The Tyran delegation includes military personnel of their highest rank. Westmore continued, they've requested to examine you privately according to their customs. We've agreed with certain safeguards. What safeguards? Frank asked. General Crane spoke, his voice carrying the unmistakable cadence of someone who'd come up through the SEAL teams. We've insisted on remote monitoring and a panic button implant. One press, and we extract you immediately. Diplomatic incident be damned. Frank appreciated the sentiment, but doubted its practicality. If these aliens had interstellar travel, a panic button was unlikely to work against their technology. Still, it was better than nothing. There's something else you should know, Cassidy added. The biometal in your system. It's changing. The cellular integration is accelerating. Whatever it's doing, it's happening faster than our scientists predicted. As if on cue, a wave of warmth spread through Frank's body, originating from his arm. The luminescent lines pulsed more intensely, and for a moment he felt stronger, more alert, senses heightened as they had been in his prime. Then it passed, leaving him with a lingering sense of something awakening within. The Tyrans say they can explain what's happening, Westmore said. They claim they've seen this before, but never in a human. Frank considered his options. Run and become a fugitive with an unknown alien substance changing his body. Stay and risk whatever the Tyrans had planned. His training told him to choose the devil he could see. All right, he said finally, I'll meet them. The meeting chamber was clearly designed for Tyran physiology. Higher ceilings, unusual seating arrangements, and lighting that felt slightly off-spectrum to human eyes. Frank was positioned in the center, standing rather than seated, as apparently Tyran custom dictated. The delegation entered from the far side of the chamber. 5 Tyrans, each standing at least 7 feet tall, with armored exoskeletons in varying shades of copper and bronze. Their features were vaguely insectoid, but with a mammalian intelligence in their compound eyes. 4 positioned themselves at cardinal points around the room. The fifth, distinguished by elaborate markings on its exoskeleton, approached Frank directly. Human Frank Sullivan. It spoke the words translated through some unseen technology. I am Commander Zoltek of the Tyran Sovereign Guard. You have bonded with the essence of a Tyran warrior. This is unprecedented. Frank maintained eye contact, showing neither fear nor deference. Not by choice, Commander. Choice is irrelevant. The essence chooses its vessel. Zoltek moved closer, examining the luminescent patterns on Frank's exposed forearm. These patterns indicate integration beyond initial stages. The essence recognizes something in your cellular structure as compatible. Your scientist told me it was from a burial vessel, Frank said. I'm carrying someone's remains. Zoltek made a clicking sound that might have been amusement or derision. Your language lacks precision. The essence is not remains. It is the distilled experience, memory, and power of a great warrior preserved to guide future generations. When a Tyron dies honorably, their essence is extracted and purified. Normally, it can only be absorbed by those of direct genetic lineage. The commander circled Frank slowly. Yet you, a human, have not only survived contact, but are actively bonding with the essence. This violates fundamental genetic law. Frank felt another pulse of warmth spread through his body, stronger this time. The luminescent lines briefly glowed brighter. All 5 Tyrans reacted, taking defensive stances. It responds to your emotional state, Zoltek observed. Fascinating. What happens now? Frank asked. Now, Zoltek replied, you come with us to Tehran. Our scientists must study this anomaly. The High Council has ordered your immediate transport. Frank tensed. I'm an American citizen on American soil. You can't just take me. Your government has already agreed, Zoltek said simply. The alternative was less pleasant for everyone involved. Before Frank could respond, a tremor ran through the building. Alarms blared and the lights flickered. Zoltek barked orders in the Tyron language, and 3 of the guards moved toward the exits. What's happening? Frank demanded. Deception, Zoltek snarled. Your leaders agreed to our terms while preparing an attack. Another stronger tremor shook the room. Through the windows, Frank saw military personnel running across the compound. This wasn't an American attack. It was a response to something else. The chamber doors burst open. General Crane entered with a tactical team, weapons raised. Sullivan, we're extracting you now. The Tyrans brought a second ship. They were planning to take you by force. Zoltek moved with shocking speed, for his size, placing himself between Frank and the extraction team. The essence bearer comes with us. This is beyond your understanding. The standoff lasted only seconds before the ceiling exploded inward. Through the newly created hole descended a Tyron craft, smaller and more angular than the diplomatic vessel outside. Its hull opened like a blooming flower, revealing a compartment clearly meant for rapid extraction. In the chaos that followed, Frank found himself caught between 2 forces. The American team trying to secure him, and the Tyrans determined to take him. He fought with the skills of his SEAL days enhanced by something new, bursts of strength and speed that shouldn't have been possible for a man his age. A Tyran guard caught him by the arm. Where their exoskeleton touched the luminescent patterns on Frank's skin, both began to glow with increasing intensity. Pain shot through Frank's body, but it wasn't his pain alone. He could somehow feel the Tyran's shock and discomfort as well. The essence recognizes its kin, the guard hissed, more surprised than hostile. The momentary connection was broken when General Crane fired the rounds, bouncing harmlessly off the Tyron's exoskeleton, but forcing it to release Frank. The extraction team formed a protective circle around him, backing toward the exit. Then Zoltek spoke a single command word, and everything changed. The luminescent patterns on Frank's arm flared with blinding intensity. Every muscle in his body seized, and he collapsed to his knees. It wasn't pain, exactly. More like every cell in his body suddenly receiving new and conflicting instructions. The essence answers to its creators, Zoltek said, approaching the incapacitated Frank. Resist, and it will tear you apart from within. Through blurred vision, Frank saw the Americans retreating under heavy fire from the second Tyron vessel. General Crane caught his eye briefly, a look that communicated volumes between soldiers. They couldn't hold against this technology. Extraction had failed. As Tyron guards lifted Frank's paralyzed body toward their extraction craft, he managed to lock eyes with Zoltek. Why me? He gasped through the cellular agony. Why? Compatible, Zoltek studied him with those alien eyes. That human is what the High Council intends to discover. One way or another. The craft sealed around them, and Frank felt the sudden vertigo of rapid acceleration. Through a small viewport, he watched as the Nevada facility and Earth itself receded with impossible speed. His last coherent thought before unconsciousness claimed him was that after 65 years of defending his country, he was leaving it behind him, perhaps forever. In the darkness of space cradled within alien technology beyond human understanding, the essence continued its work, transforming, integrating, preparing Frank Sullivan for a destiny no human was ever meant to fulfill. And on Tyron, the arena awaited, where the true test of compatibility would be written in blood, human and otherwise. Frank Sullivan woke to the sound of something scraping against metal, his eyes open to a strange purple-tinged light filtering through a translucent ceiling. For a moment, his mind scrambled to make sense of his surroundings, not his Arizona cabin, not the Nevada facility. The events of the past weeks crashed back into his consciousness like a wave breaking against rocks. The excavation, the biometal, the Tyrans, abduction. He tried to sit up and discovered his body responded sluggishly as if moving through molasses. The chamber around him wasn't a traditional cell, but more like an observation tank. 3 walls of some glass-like material and 1 solid metal surface. Beyond the transparent barriers, he could make out curved corridors and strange symbols etched into metallic surfaces. Everything carried that same organic quality he'd noticed in the Tyran vessel's architecture that seemed almost alive. A shadow fell across the front of his enclosure. Frank forced himself upright, military discipline asserting itself despite his disorientation. Standing before him was the tallest Tyran he'd encountered yet, a female judging by the more elongated cranial structure he'd observed in the limited time he'd spent with the species. Her exoskeleton had a burnished copper hue that caught the strange light, and decorative scarifications marked her armor-like skin. Most striking were her eyes, molten orange with vertical pupils that reminded Frank of a predator's gaze. "The human awakens," she said, her voice translator, rendering her words with a metallic undertone. Sooner than expected. Frank took stock of his situation. His gray jumpsuit had been replaced with something resembling medical scrubs made of a material that shifted color slightly with his movements. The luminescent lines from the biometal had spread now, tracing patterns across both arms and disappearing beneath his clothing. "Where am I?" he asked, his voice hoarser than expected. "Detention Level Central Science Facility Tyron Prime." She gestured broadly. "Welcome to a world no human has seen with living eyes." Frank approached the transparent barrier, noting how the Tyron female tracked his movement with the attentive focus of a trained soldier. "And you are?" "I am Cyrax's Sovereign Guard, 3rd Bloodline." She straightened to her in full height, nearly 8 feet tall. "I have been assigned to observe you until the High Council determines your fate." Frank recognized military bearing when he saw it, regardless of the species. "You're not a scientist." "I am a warrior," she corrected, mandibles flexing with what might have been pride. Commander Zoltek believed a scientific observer might be insufficient should complications arise. Complications. Frank pressed his palm against the barrier, testing its give. None. Like me trying to escape. Cyrax made a clicking sound that Frank was beginning to recognize as Tyrone amusement. Escape to where human you are on a planet whose atmosphere would dissolve your lungs within minutes. The nearest human settlement is approximately 40 light-years distant. She tilted her head, studying him. "Besides, you lack the strength to break containment." As if triggered by her words, Frank felt a surge of warmth flow through the luminescent lines on his body. For a brief moment, his fatigue vanished, replaced by a rush of energy that reminded him of combat stimulants he'd used during particularly demanding missions. He flexed his hand, watching as the glow beneath his skin intensified. Cyrax noticed, too, her posture shifting subtly to a more defensive stance. "The essence responds to challenge," she observed. "Interesting." A door slid open at the far end of the corridor, and 3 Tyrans entered. 2 guards flanking an older individual whose exoskeleton had faded to a pale brass color. Age, Frank guessed, or its equivalent in their species. The newcomer approached Frank's enclosure, eyes milky compared to Cyrax's vibrant orange. "I am Elder Kaizax of the High Science Council," the aged Tehran announced. "You will be brought before the sovereign arena in 6 cycles." Frank stood straighter, facing the elder with the same respect he would show a superior officer, but not submission. "What exactly is the sovereign arena?" "It is where worth is tested," Elder Kaizax replied. "The essence you carry belonged to a great champion. The High Council wishes to determine if your compatibility is mere biological accident or something more significant." Frank understood the implications immediately. "You're going to make me fight." "The essence chooses warriors," Cyrax interjected. "If it has truly accepted you, you will survive the arena. If not," she left the conclusion unspoken. "And if I refuse to participate?" Frank asked, though he already suspected the answer. Elder Kaizax made a dismissive gesture. "The arena is not optional, it is diagnosis. Through combat, we will observe how the essence manifests in a human physiology. If you are fortunate, it will be enlightening for all involved." "And if I'm not fortunate," Cyrax answered instead of the elder, "then your death will be quick and the essence will be recovered for proper burial with its rightful kind." The elder and guards departed, leaving Frank alone with Cyrax once more. He studied her carefully, noting the battle scars that marked her exoskeleton. Evidence of a lifetime of combat, not unlike his own collection of scars. "You've fought in this arena," he stated rather than asked. Cyrax nodded once. "All sovereign guards proved themselves there. I have 16 victories." "And the opponents who didn't win?" Her orange eyes fixed on his. "They are remembered with honor if they fought with courage." Frank turned away, pacing the limited confines of his enclosure. 6 cycles, whatever that meant in Earth time. Not long to prepare for combat against creatures evolved on a higher gravity world with natural armor. The odds weren't in his favor. Then again, Frank Sullivan had built a career on defying odds. The sovereign arena rose like an ancient coliseum from the center of a vast circular plaza. Its exterior constructed from some stone-like material that shimmered with embedded crystalline structures soared hundreds of feet into Tehran's amber sky. Frank, escorted by Cyrax and 4 additional guards, approached through a processional pathway lined with towering statues of Tehran warriors in various combat poses. "Your champions?" Frank asked, nodding toward the statues. "The Immortal 16, Cyrax replied. "Warriors whose essence changed our history, the greatest of our kind." As they walked, Frank observed everything with the calculated awareness of someone mapping potential escape routes, an automatic behavior ingrained through decades of operations in hostile territory. But escape wasn't the objective, not yet. First, survival. The preparation chamber beneath the arena resembled a combination of locker room and armory. Various Tehran combatants adjusted equipment and performed stretching rituals that, despite the alien physiology, reminded Frank of pre-mission preparations among his SEAL teammates. Combat, it seemed, had universal preliminaries regardless of species. Cyrax directed Frank to a small alcove. "You will remain here until summoned. First combat is against Grixis, a juvenile warrior. A courtesy to allow you to acclimate." Frank understood what wasn't being said. "You mean it's a warm-up fight, they don't expect me to survive?" "Grixis has killed 6 opponents this season," Cyrax stated flatly. "But he is young, impulsive. If the essence truly works within you, you might last longer than expected." She turned to leave, but Frank called after her. "What exactly am I supposed to fight with? I don't see any weapons for humans here." Cyrax paused. "The essence is your weapon. It chose you. Trust it." Then, almost as an afterthought, she added, "Or die quickly. There is honor in that too." Left alone, Frank examined his body and the reflective surface of the alcove wall. The luminescent patterns had continued to spread now, creating a network of glowing lines across his chest, back, and down his legs. They pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. When he focused on them, he could sense something. Not quite a presence, but a potential, like muscles he hadn't yet learned to flex. A deep, resonant tone echoed through the preparation chamber. Around him, Tehran combatants began moving toward various exits. Cyrax reappeared at his alcove. "It is time," she said simply. The passage to the arena floor was a long, ascending tunnel that gradually filled with light and the distant roar of spectators. Frank walked steadily, neither hurrying nor hesitating. As the tunnel opened onto the arena itself, the sound became physically overwhelming. Thousands of Tyrans in tiered seating that rose nearly vertically around a circular combat area, perhaps 100 yards in diameter. The floor was covered in a substance that resembled rust-colored sand, but shifted more fluidly with each step. Across the arena stood his opponent, Grixis, the juvenile warrior who still towered a full foot above Frank's 6-foot frame. The young Tyron's exoskeleton gleamed like polished bronze unmarked by the battle scars that decorated veterans like Syrax. He carried no visible weapons but flexed clawed hands that looked capable of ripping through steel. A voice boomed through the arena, speaking first in the clicking, chittering language of the Tyrans, then switching to translated English. The trial of essence begins. Grixis' sixth blood of House Varak against the human essence bearer. Frank took a combat stance, balanced and centered, as he'd been taught decades ago. The biometal essence within him stirred warmth, spreading through his limbs. He felt stronger, more alert, his senses sharpening beyond normal human capacity. He could hear the individual clicks and whirs of Grixis' exoskeleton as the young warrior shifted position. Could smell the alien's anticipation, a sharp metallic odor. When Grixis charged, it was with the predictable aggression of youth, fast, powerful, but telegraphing his intentions. Frank sidestepped, using the Tyron's momentum against him, a basic principle that apparently translated across species. Grixis stumbled, surprised by the human speed. The crowd murmured. They hadn't expected the old human to last past the first engagement. Grixis recovered quickly, circling more cautiously now. The essence cannot save you, human. It belongs with true warriors. Frank didn't waste breath on a response. Instead, he studied his opponent's movement patterns, identifying the slightly favored right side, the tendency to lower his guard after fainting. All combatants had tells, human or otherwise. The next exchange came faster. Grixis launched a series of striking combinations that would have pulverized a normal human. Frank evaded most, blocked one with a forearm that should have shattered under the impact, and countered with a precision strike to a joint where the exoskeleton segments connected. Grixis hissed in pain and surprise. Frank felt the essence respond to combat, the luminescent patterns glowing brighter, feeding him strength and speed that his 65-year-old body shouldn't possess. But it wasn't just physical enhancement. Somehow he understood Tyron physiology, knew instinctively where to strike for maximum effect, how to time his movements against the rhythm of their exoskeletal flexing. The fight continued, Grixis growing increasingly frustrated as the human not only survived, but landed effective counterattacks. The young warrior finally committed to an all-out assault, sacrificing technique for raw power. It was the opening Frank needed. As Grixis charged, Frank dropped low, using the shifting sand-like floor to slide beneath the Tyron's guard. He drove his fist upward into the unprotected area beneath Grixis' jaw, a precision strike that sent neural feedback cascading through the alien system. Grixis collapsed, not unconscious but temporarily paralyzed by the overload. The arena fell silent. Then a singular sound began, a rhythmic tapping of clawed hands against armored legs. It spread through the crowd until the entire arena vibrated with it. The announcer's voice boomed again. First trial complete. The essence acknowledges skill. Frank stood over his defeated opponent, breathing heavily, but otherwise unharmed. He looked up at the central viewing box where he could make out Elder Kaisax and other robed figures. Their response would determine what happened next. After a moment of consultation, the elder raised a hand, one digit extended, a signal of some kind. Frank turned to see Syrax entering the arena, moving with the fluid grace of a natural predator. Second trial commences, the announcer proclaimed. Syrax, Bonebreaker of the third bloodline, tests the essence bearer. Frank barely had time to process this development before Syrax attacked, and immediately he understood the vast difference between a juvenile warrior and a proven champion. Where Grixis had been fast, Syrax moved like liquid lightning. Where he had been strong, she was devastating. Her first strike connected despite Frank's enhanced reflexes, sending him tumbling across the arena floor. The crowd roared its approval. This was what they had come to see, the human put in his place. Frank rose unsteadily, tasting blood. The essence within him pulsed urgently, responding to the greater threat. As Cyrax closed for another attack, he felt something new. Not just enhanced strength and speed, but intuition bordering on precognition. He could almost see the pattern of her attack before it happened. He met her second assault with a counterattack that surprised even him, matching her speed and turning her own momentum against her. A strike that should have crushed his skull instead met empty air as he twisted away, landing a blow to her midsection that actually caused her to stagger back. Cyrax's orange eyes widened slightly, the first sign of respect he'd seen from her. "The essence teaches you our ways," she observed, circling him with new caution. "But experience cannot be granted, only earned." What followed was combat unlike anything Frank had experienced in his long military career. Cyrax attacked with techniques perfected over decades, each movement a potential death blow. Frank defended with increasingly fluid responses, the essence guiding his body through counters and evasions that felt both foreign and strangely familiar. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Frank could feel the essence burning through his reserves, pushing his human physiology to its limits and beyond. Fatigue began to slow his reactions. A strike slipped through his guard, cracking ribs. Another opened a gash above his eye. The crowd's excitement built with each blow landed against the human. Cyrax pressed her advantage, driving Frank toward the arena wall. "Submit, human," she said during a momentary pause. "The council has seen enough. Die with dignity." Frank spat blood onto the sand. "Not today." He launched himself at her in a final desperate attack. Cyrax met it with a devastating kick aimed directly at his already broken ribs. A killing blow by any reasonable assessment. The sound of bone snapping echoed through the arena. The crowd gasped collectively, expecting to see the human fall dead or dying. Instead, Frank stumbled, then straightened as the luminescent patterns across his body flared with blinding intensity. The pain in his side transformed into warmth that spread outward from the point of impact. He pressed a hand against his ribs, finding them solid whole, healed instantly by the essence. The silence that followed was profound, broken only by Cyrax's startled intake of breath. "You fixed me," Frank said, wonder mixing with gratitude. Cyrax stepped back, mandibles flaring in confusion. "That is impossible. My strikes destroy. They do not mend." "Well," Frank replied, standing tall now, "either you're terrible at breaking bones or you just saved my life." The crowd erupted into a cacophony of clicks and chirps. Not bloodlust, but astonishment. The matchmaster's voice cut through the noise. "By Tyron law, combat halts if both combatants live after fatal injury. This trial ends in anomaly." Frank extended his hand toward Cyrax, a human gesture of respect that she studied with evident confusion before finally acknowledging with a slight nod, though she did not take his hand. "You are no ordinary human," she stated. "Neither are you," Frank replied softly. And in that moment, something shifted between them, the beginning of understanding that transcended species and conflict. 3 days later, Frank found himself in a medical research chamber deep beneath the arena complex. The room hummed with energy from equipment whose purpose he could only guess at. Various Tyron scientists moved around him, taking readings and speaking rapidly in their native language. The translator device they'd provided only caught fragments. Cellular integration, genetic resonance, unprecedented compatibility. The door slid open and Cyrax entered. Unlike their previous encounters, she wore no battle armor, only a fitted garment that resembled a military uniform. Without the additional bulk of combat gear, her frame appeared more proportionate, though still powerfully built. She dismissed the scientist with a gesture that brooked no argument. When they were alone, she approached the examination platform where Frank sat. "The High Council has been in session for 3 cycles discussing your case." Frank had spent enough time around military hierarchies to recognize when information was being withheld. "And what have they decided?" "They have not yet reached consensus." Cyrax's orange eyes studied the luminescent patterns visible beneath Frank's skin. "The essence continues to integrate with your biology at an accelerating rate. It should be impossible." Frank flexed his hand, watching the patterns shift with his movement. "Why, what makes humans incompatible?" Cyrax seemed to consider how much to reveal. "The essence is plasma energetic. It operates at temperatures that should incinerate human tissue from within. Yet somehow your cells have adapted." She moved closer, examining him with professional detachment. How did you come into contact with Tyron biometal before the excavation? The question caught Frank off guard. I hadn't. That was my first encounter with anything Tyron. Impossible, Sirac stated flatly. Initial compatibility requires prior exposure or genetic modification. Standard humans cannot bond with the essence. Frank thought back to his long military career, particularly the classified operations after the First Gulf War. There was something, he said slowly. A military experiment, voluntary for special operators with certain genetic markers. They called it Project Quicksilver. Sirac's posture changed subtly, her attention sharpening. Explain. After the Gulf War, I volunteered for a classified program. Experimental injections meant to accelerate healing, enhance strength and endurance. Most participants washed out with severe side effects. A few of us adapted. Frank touched an old scar on his neck where the injections had been administered. The program was shut down after 2 years. Too unpredictable, they said. These injections described their appearance. Metallic silver, Frank recalled. They seemed to move with a life of their own. Almost like he trailed off as realization dawned. Like the essence, Sirac finished for him. Your military somehow acquired Tyron biometal and experimented on their own soldiers. Her mandibles clicked in what Frank was beginning to recognize as agitation. This explains your compatibility. Your body was already prepared, altered, to accept the essence. Are you saying the U.S. military had Tyron technology 30 years ago? The implications were staggering. Not technology, Sirac corrected. Life, sacred essence, and not willingly given. She paced the chamber, clearly disturbed by this revelation. During the period your people call the Cold War, a Tyron reconnaissance vessel was shot down over your Arctic region. The crew died, but their essence capsules would have remained intact. Your military must have recovered them. Frank processed this information, connecting pieces of a puzzle he hadn't known existed. That's why your people were monitoring Earth. You were looking for your missing crew. Sirac nodded once. The vessel you encountered in your desert was part of that search mission. It suffered catastrophic failure and crashed. And now I've got some of your sacred essence flowing through me because of a military experiment I volunteered for 3 decades ago. Frank laughed without humor. Cosmic coincidence. There is no coincidence in genetic law, Sirac replied seriously. The essence in your body is responding to the trace elements from your previous exposure. It recognizes itself. A heavy silence fell between them, broken only by the ambient hum of equipment. Finally, Frank asked the question that had been foremost in his mind since the arena. What happens now? Sirac moved to a control panel and activated a holographic display. It showed microscopic images of what Frank assumed were his own cells, illuminated from within by the flowing essence. The integration is approaching critical threshold. Soon the transformation will be irreversible. Transformation into what? Something neither fully human nor Tyron. Something new. Sirac's tone held a mixture of scientific curiosity and what might have been concern. The High Council fears this potential. Genetic purity is sacred to my kind. The idea of hybridization is unsettling. Frank stood facing her directly. Are they planning to extract the essence, cut it out of me? Sirac hesitated before answering. There are factions within the council with different objectives. Elder Kaisax leads those who wish to study the integration process. Others, including my father, General Varix, advocate for immediate extraction to preserve the essence's purity. Your father is on the council. This was new information, potentially valuable. He commands our military forces. His influence is substantial. Something in her tone suggested complexity beyond simple filial respect. And what do you think should happen? Frank pressed instinctively, sensing her divided loyalties. Sirac's gaze met his directly. I witnessed something unprecedented in the arena. The essence not only bonded with you, it healed you through me. That suggests a connection more profound than mere biological compatibility. She lowered her voice. But my opinion holds little weight against the council's decree. Before Frank could respond, alarms blared throughout the facility. Sirac moved immediately to another control panel, checking security feeds. Her posture stiffened. What's happening? Frank asked. The extraction team has been dispatched, she replied tersely. General Variks overruled the council's deliberations. They're coming for you now. The implications were clear. Frank's time had run out. How long? Minutes at most. Sarek seemed to be wrestling with an internal conflict. Finally, she made a decision. Come with me, quickly. She led him through a service corridor that bypassed the main hallways. As they moved, Frank noticed the essence responding to his elevated adrenaline. The luminescent patterns brightening energy, flowing into his muscles, senses sharpening beyond human norm. Where are we going? He asked as they descended through areas of the facility he hadn't seen before. The atmospheric adaptation chamber. If you're going to survive what comes next, you'll need protection. Cyrax's pace was brisk, but measured, avoiding attention. They entered a circular room filled with various environmental suits designed for Tyron physiology. Cyrax selected one and began modifying it rapidly. This will provide breathable atmosphere and protection from Tyron climate extremes. It's designed for smaller subspecies, but should accommodate human proportions. You're helping me escape, Frank stated. Why? Cyrax paused, her alien features unreadable. The essence chose you for a reason. That choice deserves respect, even if it defies our traditions. She finished her modifications and handed him the adapted suit. And perhaps I recognize something in you, something worthy. Frank donned the suit, which adjusted surprisingly well to his human form. The helmet sealed with a hiss and a heads-up display activated, translating Tyron atmospheric data into formats he could understand. The northern crater fields contain abandoned ships from the last civil conflict, Cyrax explained, checking the corridor before motioning him forward. If we reach them, you might find a vessel capable of interstellar travel. Frank questioned. You're coming with me. Cyrax's mandibles flexed in what might have been a grim smile. The moment I removed you from the medical chamber, I became a traitor to the council. My options are now as limited as yours. The facility's security systems were in high alert mode, complicating their movement through the lower levels. Twice they had to duck into maintenance alcoves to avoid guard patrols. Frank noticed how the essence seemed to enhance his stealth capabilities as well, allowing him to move with uncanny silence and precision. They reached an external access port that opened onto the barren Tyron landscape. The alien world stretched before them, a terrain of crystalline formations and metallic sand dunes, beneath a sky that glowed amber even at night. In the distance, jagged mountains rose like the teeth of some enormous predator. The crater fields lie beyond the northern ridge, Cyrax indicated. We'll need a transport. As if on cue, a small patrol craft descended nearby, its pilot and apparently checking the outer perimeter. Cyrax moved with practiced efficiency, signaling it down with an authority that brooked no questions. As the craft landed, she approached the pilot. Security override Zal Tertius, she barked in the Tyron language, which Frank's suit now partially translated. Transfer control and disembark for facility inspection. The pilot, recognizing the insignia of the Sovereign Guard, complied without question. As soon as he was clear of the craft, Cyrax stunned him with a small device she produced from her uniform. He'll recover in 30 minutes, she explained, helping Frank aboard the unfamiliar vessel. By then we should be beyond tracking range. The patrol craft's controls were designed for Tyron physiology, but Cyrax operated them with practiced ease. They rose swiftly into the alien sky, accelerating toward the northern horizon. Once they discover we're gone, they'll lock down all transit systems, she said. We have perhaps 10 minutes before pursuit is organized. Frank watched the alien landscape blur beneath them, the essence within him seemingly resonating with the return to motion and purpose. You're risking everything, he observed. Your position, your life. Why? Cyrax kept her focus on piloting, but answered after a moment. I have served the Council faithfully for decades, believing in the purity of our ways. But what I witnessed in the arena challenges everything we've been taught about the essence. If our most sacred beliefs can be proven wrong, she left the thought unfinished. They flew in silence for several minutes, the crystalline landscape giving way to more rugged terrain. Ahead, Frank could see the crater fields Cyrax had mentioned, a vast depression in the planet's surface dotted with what appeared to be crashed and abandoned vessels of various sizes. Suddenly, warning indicators flashed across the craft's control panel. Cyrax hissed what Frank assumed were Tyron expletives. Pursuit craft launching from Central Command, she reported. 6 units heavily armed. We've been compromised sooner than expected. Frank scanned the approaching crater field, his military training automatically assessing the tactical situation. Can we reach the ships before they intercept us? Yes, but they'll be on us before we can activate any vessel. Cyrax banked the craft, sharply dropping altitude to use the terrain for partial cover. And that assumes we find one functional enough for escape. Frank felt the essence respond to the threat, feeding him not just strength, but what felt like tactical insights, as if drawing on stored experience beyond his own. Take us to the largest vessel you can find. I have an idea. The patrol craft skimmed over the first line of craters, weaving between derelict ships partially buried in metallic sand. Cyrax piloted with remarkable skill, using the debris field to break pursuit tracking. Finally, she set the craft down beside a massive cruiser-class vessel that listed at an angle, its hull breached in multiple places, but its core structure intact. This was a command ship from the Unity Wars, Cyrax explained as they disembarked. Abandoned after sustaining critical damage, but the primary systems might be salvageable. They entered through a rupture in the lower hull, Frank's suit protecting him from the toxic atmosphere that had accumulated in the derelict vessel. The essence within him seemed to pulse more strongly, almost as if recognizing the environment. The essence is reacting to the ship, Frank noted. Cyrax nodded. This vessel would have carried warriors whose essence was preserved upon death. There's residual resonance in the very structure. They made their way toward the command center, navigating corridors that showed evidence of both battle damage and long abandonment. As they entered the bridge, Cyrax immediately moved to the primary control systems, checking power levels and operational status. Main reactor is dormant but intact, she reported. Secondary systems functional. This vessel could fly, but not quickly, and its defensive capabilities are severely compromised. Frank was examining a tactical display that still functioned on emergency power. It showed the approaching pursuit craft, now just minutes away. We don't need to outrun them, just outlast them long enough to send a message. Cyrax looked up from the controls. What message to whom? To Earth, Frank said. Your people have been watching us for decades. Now it's time for full disclosure. About the essence, about Project Quicksilver, about what your father is planning. Before Cyrax could respond, the ship's sensors detected movement outside. The pursuit had arrived. A voice boomed through an external communications system. General Variks commanding immediate surrender. Frank recognized the authoritative tone of a lifetime military commander, one used to unquestioned obedience. My daughter, Variks' voice continued, now addressing Cyrax directly. Return the human and the essence he has defiled. Your punishment will be mitigated if you comply now. Cyrax's posture stiffened at her father's voice. For a moment, Frank saw uncertainty in her alien features, the lifelong conditioning of obedience warring with her recent doubts. The essence chose him, she finally replied through the ship's communication system. It healed through me. These are signs we cannot ignore, Father. The signs of contamination, Variks retorted. The essence must be purified. The human must be eliminated. These are the foundations of our society, daughter. Would you betray them for an alien aberration? Frank approached Cyrax, careful not to intrude on her personal space, but offering his presence as support. What your father isn't saying is why he's so desperate to extract the essence from me. What is he afraid of? Cyrax's gaze shifted between Frank and the external visual feed showing her father's forces surrounding the derelict cruiser. What do you mean, think about it, Frank pressed. If the essence is just responding to trace elements from my previous exposure, that's a scientific curiosity, not a threat. Unless, he paused as pieces fell into place. Unless the essence is showing them something they don't want to see, a potential they've been denying. Understanding dawned in Cyrax's expression. The hybridization potential. The possibility that Tyron essence can bond with compatible species, creating something new. Something that challenges their belief in genetic purity, Frank concluded. Outside, Variks' patience was wearing thin. Breach teams prepare to enter the vessel. Capture protocols for the human. Stun only for the traitor. Cyrax made her decision, turning fully to the ship's controls. We need to activate the command center's defenses. They won't hold long, but they'll buy us time. As she worked, Frank felt the essence responding to the imminent threat flowing through his body with increasing urgency. The luminescent patterns now covered most of his visible skin, pulsing with a rhythm that matched the ship's dormant systems. "The ship is responding to you," Cyrax observed with surprise. "The essence in your body is resonating with the vessel's core." Frank placed his hands on what appeared to be a central control interface. Instantly, systems that had been dormant for decades began to activate, displays illuminating throughout the bridge. The essence flowed from his body into the ship itself, creating a connection that transcended normal operation. "It's not just responding," Frank said, wonder in his voice. "It's linking with me, showing me how to access its systems." Through this unexpected connection, Frank could suddenly access the vessel's defense network communications array and even its historical archives. Information flowed into his consciousness, not overwhelming but organized as if the essence was translating the ship's Tyron systems into concepts his human mind could comprehend. "Your father hasn't been honest with the Council," Frank said as data streamed through his awareness. "The essence capsules on Earth weren't from a crashed reconnaissance mission. They were deliberately placed there, an unauthorized experiment to see if humans could be compatible hosts." Cyrax's eyes widened. "How could you know this?" "It's in the ship's records. Your father commanded this vessel during the Unity Wars. He was part of a faction that believed expanding the essence beyond Tyron bloodlines was necessary for species survival." Frank navigated through more historical data. "The Council rejected the proposal as heresy, but your father continued in secret. Outside breach teams had reached the hull. They would be through within minutes." "We need to broadcast this information," Frank said urgently. "Not just to Earth, but to the Tyron Council. Everyone needs to know what the essence is truly capable of." Cyrax hesitated only briefly before moving to the communications array. "A multi-spectrum broadcast will reach both Tyron's Central Command and the long-range receivers your people have in your solar system." As she prepared the transmission, Frank continued to interface with the ship through the Essence link, compiling the relevant data into a comprehensive package. The connection was becoming stronger, more intuitive, as if the Essence was evolving with each new challenge. "Breach in progress," Cyrax warned as alarms sounded throughout the vessel. Frank felt the Essence surge within him, responding to the danger with new capabilities. The luminescent patterns across his body flared with blinding intensity. Suddenly, he could sense the positions of the breach teams, could feel their movements through the ship's damaged hull. "I can hold them off," he said with newfound certainty. "Focus on the transmission." While Cyrax worked at the communications array, Frank directed the ship's remaining defensive systems with unprecedented precision, not through manual controls but through direct essence connection. Barriers activated in specific corridors to channel the invaders into non-critical areas. Environmental systems created zones of disruptive atmospheric conditions that slowed their approach without causing permanent harm. It was like conducting a symphony of tactical responses, drawing on both his lifetime of military experience and the essence's knowledge of Tyron systems. For the first time since the biometal had entered his body, Frank felt true harmony with it. Not just physical enhancement, but a melding of consciousness and purpose. "Transmission ready," Cyrax announced, "broadcasting on all frequencies." As the data package began transmitting to both worlds, the command center doors buckled under sustained assault. The breach teams had finally reached them. "Whatever happens next," Frank said to Cyrax, "thank you for believing in the possibility of something new." The doors crashed open and General Varix himself entered, flanked by elite guards. His exoskeleton bore the elaborate markings of supreme military command, and his eyes burned with a fury that transcended species barriers. "What abomination is this?" he demanded, seeing Frank connected to the ship's systems through glowing tendrils of essence that extended from his body. "Not abomination, Father," Cyrax replied, standing protectively near Frank. "Evolution, the future you once believed in yourself." Varix's gaze shifted between his daughter and the human recognition and calculation warring in his expression. "You've accessed the archives, you know." "We know you seeded Earth with essence capsules decades ago," Frank confirmed. "An unauthorized experiment to prove cross-species compatibility was possible. The Council shut it down, but not before enough biometal reached human hands to create Project Quicksilver." "A necessary risk," Varix defended. "Our population was declining. Genetic stagnation threatened our survival. The essence needed new vectors, new potential. Then why try to extract it from me now? Frank challenged. Why deny what you once believed in? Varex's mandibles clicked in agitation. Politics changed. Doctrines hardened. Admitting my role would mean execution for heresy. His posture shifted subtly. But now that the evidence is undeniable, without warning, Varex signaled his guards. They raised weapons, but not at Frank, at the communication array. No. Syrax moved to intercept, but too late. Energy blasts destroyed the transmission equipment, but Frank felt a surge of satisfaction through the essence link. The broadcast is complete, he informed Varex calmly. Both Earth and the Tyrant Council have received everything. Your experiment, your cover-up, all of it. Varex studied Frank with new intensity. Then there's only one option remaining. The experiment must continue, under my control. He addressed his guards. Secure them both. We leave for the private research facility immediately. As the guards moved to comply, Frank felt the essence responding once more, not with aggression but with something deeper. The connection between himself, Syrax, and the ship deepened, creating a three-way resonance that manifested as visible energy arcing between them. Father, Syrax said, her voice tinged with both sadness and determination. The essence has already chosen its path. Neither you nor the Council can control it now. The energy connecting Frank to the ship intensified, spreading to encompass Syrax as well. The essence recognized her as Kinna's ally, as something more than either of them had anticipated. In that moment of connection, Frank understood what needed to happen next. The ship can fly, he said to Syrax through their shared link. Not far, but enough. Do you trust me? Her orange eyes met his, and he felt rather than heard her answer. Yes. With a thought channeled through the essence, Frank activated the derelict cruiser's dormant engines. The vessel shuddered, decades-old systems protesting but responding. Varex and his guards staggered as the ship began to rise from its crater, sand and debris cascading from its hull. What are you doing? Varex demanded, genuine alarm replacing his previous confidence. Continuing the experiment, Frank replied. Just not under your terms. As the ship climbed into the amber Tyron sky, Frank and Syrax stood united against whatever would come next. The Council's judgment, Varex's schemes, the unpredictable evolution of the essence itself. Two individuals from worlds light years apart, connected by something ancient and something entirely new. The old warrior and the alien champion, bound by essence and choice, ascending toward a future neither of their species had imagined possible. The ancient cruiser shuddered through Tyron's upper atmosphere, trailing debris and venting atmosphere from a dozen breaches in its damaged hull. In the command center, Frank Sullivan maintained his connection with the ship's systems through the luminescent essence that now flowed freely between his body and the vessel's core. Beside him, Syrax monitored the failing structural integrity, her copper-hued exoskeleton reflecting the emergency lighting that pulsed throughout the bridge. General Varex and his guards had been sealed in a secondary compartment, contained but not harmed. Frank had insisted on that despite the tactical disadvantage. Some principles transcended species and circumstances. Even in desperate flight, there were lines he wouldn't cross. Hull breaches on decks 3 through 7. Syrax reported, her voice steady despite the gravity of their situation. Life support systems failing in the eastern quadrant. This vessel wasn't meant to fly again, Frank. He nodded, feeling every damaged system through his essence link. We don't need it to fly far, just far enough to buy us time. Through the forward viewports, the amber sky of Tykbiron was giving way to the darkness of space. Behind them, pursuit craft launched from the planet's surface, sleek modern vessels that would overtake their lumbering cruiser within minutes. My father's elite squadron, Syrax observed, tracking their approach on tactical displays. The finest pilots on Tyron. Frank felt the essence respond to this new threat, feeding him not just information, but tactical insights beyond his own experience. Somehow it was drawing on stored knowledge, perhaps from the Tyron warrior it had originally belonged to. Take us toward the asteroid field, he instructed, referring to the dense belt of mineral-rich rocks that orbited relatively close to the planet. The pursuit craft are faster but less maneuverable than this cruiser. Syrax looked skeptical. This vessel can barely maintain course, let alone perform complex navigation through an asteroid field. Trust me, Frank said, meeting her orange eyes. "The essence is showing me possibilities." As Cyrax adjusted their course, Frank deepened his connection with the ship. The luminescent patterns across his skin brightened tendrils of light extending further into the command systems. He could feel the vessel as if it were an extension of his own body, damaged, struggling, but responsive to his will in ways that defied conventional piloting. The first asteroids appeared ahead, jagged metallic formations that glinted in the light of Tyrone's distant sun. The pursuit squadron closed rapidly from behind weapon systems charging. "They're preparing to fire," Cyrax warned, "disabling shots aimed at our propulsion systems." Frank didn't respond verbally. Instead, he channeled his intention through the essence link, commanding the cruiser to perform maneuvers that should have been impossible given its condition. The massive vessel banked sharply using an asteroid's gravity well to slingshot into a denser part of the field where the smaller pursuit craft would have difficulty following. Energy weapons fired from the lead pursuit craft grazing their shields. Alarms blared throughout the command center. "Shield integrity at 30%, Cyrax reported. "One more direct hit, and we're exposed." Frank guided the cruiser deeper into the asteroid field, navigating by instinct and essence, enhanced perception. The pursuing vessels followed, but more cautiously, forced to reduce speed amidst the unpredictable orbital paths of the asteroids. "Your father is leading the pursuit himself," Frank noted, sensing the tactical approach of the lead vessel. "He's not firing to disable anymore. He's targeting our command center specifically." Cyrax's mandibles clicked in what Frank now recognized as controlled anger. He would rather destroy the essence than see it evolve beyond his control. She paused, making a decision. "I need to speak with him directly." Frank nodded, diverting some of the ship's failing power to the communication systems. Cyrax opened a channel to the lead pursuit craft. "Father, this is Cyrax. The human and I are linked through the essence. If you destroy us, you destroy what you've sought your entire career. Proof that the essence can transcend bloodlines." General Varick's voice came through, filled with cold fury. "What I sought was controlled evolution, daughter. Not unregulated contamination. That human has corrupted not only the essence, but you as well." "He's shown me truth," Cyrax countered. "The essence chose him. It's healing through our connection. These are signs that our most sacred traditions may have been limiting us, not protecting us." "Blasphemy," Varick snarled. "The essence must remain pure. Its power cannot be entrusted to lesser species." Frank felt a surge of indignation through the essence link. Not his own emotion, but something coming from the essence itself, as if it objected to being characterized as a mere resource to be controlled. "The essence disagrees, General," Frank interjected into the communication. "It's not a tool for your ambition. It's a live, evolving, seeking new potential, just like any conscious being." A barrage of energy blasts answered his statement, impacting the cruiser's weakened shields. The command center rocked violently, systems failing across multiple decks. "Shield failure imminent," Cyrax reported. "We can't sustain another attack." Frank scanned their surroundings through the essence link, searching for options. Ahead, partially concealed within a massive asteroid, he detected an anomaly, a structure that didn't match the surrounding mineral formations. "There," he indicated, "some kind of installation built into that large asteroid. Can you identify it?" Cyrax focused the remaining sensor arrays. "It's an abandoned research outpost from before the Unity Wars, supposedly decommissioned decades ago." "Your father's secret facility," Frank suggested. "Possibly. The location would be strategic, hidden yet accessible." Cyrax studied the readings more closely. "Power signatures are minimal but present. It may still have functional systems." Another volley from the pursuit squadron narrowly missed them as Frank maneuvered the cruiser behind a cluster of smaller asteroids. "We need to abandon ship. It's our only chance." "The outpost might not have life support," Cyrax cautioned. "The essence will protect us," Frank replied with a certainty that surprised even him. "It's been evolving and to meet each new challenge. I think it wants to reach that outpost as much as we do." They worked quickly as Cyrax programming an automated course for the cruiser that would lead the pursuit squadron away from their actual destination. Frank, meanwhile, prepared one of the remaining emergency pods, designed for Tyrone physiology, but adaptable enough for their needs. As they finished preparations, a final barrage from Varick's squadron struck the cruiser's engines. The vessel lurched violently, internal gravity fluctuating. "Time to go," Frank said, the essence tendrils reluctantly disconnecting from the ship's systems and retracting back into his body. The luminescent patterns across his skin pulsed with renewed intensity, as if gathering strength for what lay ahead. They launched the escape pod during a moment when the pursuing vessels were navigating around a particularly dense asteroid cluster. The tiny craft, barely large enough for both of them, powered toward the hidden outpost using minimal thrusters to avoid detection. Behind them, the damaged cruiser continued on its programmed course, drawing the pursuit squadron deeper into the asteroid field. Frank watched through the pod's viewport as energy weapons finally breached the cruiser's remaining shields, tearing through its ancient hull. The vessel broke apart in a series of silent explosions, debris scattering across space. "They'll realize we're not aboard once they analyze the wreckage," Sirax noted. "We have perhaps 1 hour before they retrace our path." The escape pod drifted the final distance to the hidden outpost, using the asteroid's mass to mask their approach. As they neared, Frank could see the installation more clearly. A sophisticated facility built directly into the rocky surface, its external features camouflaged to blend with the surrounding terrain. Only a single small docking port revealed its artificial nature. They managed to dock with surprising ease, the port's automated systems still operational, despite apparent abandonment. As the airlock cycled, Frank felt the essence responding to their new environment. Not with alarm, but with something like recognition. "The essence knows this place," he said to Sirax. She nodded, unsealing her helmet as atmospheric readings stabilized. "If this was indeed my father's facility, it may have been used for essence research. The residual energy would be recognizable." They moved cautiously through the airlock into the outpost proper. Emergency lighting activated automatically at their presence, revealing a research facility that appeared to have been evacuated in haste. Equipment remained in place, data terminals still powered in standby mode, personal effects scattered as if their owners had departed with minimal warning. "What happened here?" Frank wondered, examining the abandoned workstations. "Based on the condition, I'd estimate it was abandoned during the Council's purge of unauthorized research following the Unity Wars." Sirax replied, activating a central terminal. "When my father's faction lost political power, their facilities would have been shut down immediately." The terminal came to life, displaying Tyron script that scrolled too quickly for Frank to follow, even with his essence-enhanced perception. Sirax studied it intently. "This confirms it," she said after a moment. "This was my father's primary essence research facility. The project was called Transcendence, an attempt to expand essence compatibility beyond Tyron bloodlines. The same project that led him to seed Earth with essence samples," Frank concluded. "He was looking for compatible species." "Not just compatible," Sirax corrected, continuing to scan the data. "He was seeking species that could enhance the essence, evolve it beyond its current limitations." She looked up at Frank, her orange eyes intense. "According to these records, human genetic structure was particularly promising due to your species' remarkable adaptability." Frank moved closer to the terminal, the essence within him responding to the information displayed. "So I wasn't an accident. The Project Quicksilver experiments were building on your father's research, continuing what the Council had forbidden." "Precisely. And based on these readings," Sirax activated a scanning device built into the terminal, directing it toward Frank. "The essence in your body has evolved further in weeks than it would in centuries within a Tyron host. You're not just containing it, you're transforming it." A distant sound interrupted their discovery, the unmistakable hum of approaching vessels. Sirax quickly checked the outpost's external sensors. "Two pursuit craft on direct approach," she reported. "They found us sooner than expected." Frank felt the essence surging within him, responding to the imminent threat. "Is there anything here we can use to defend ourselves, weapons, communications?" Sirax scanned the facility schematics that appeared on the terminal. "Better. This outpost has a fully equipped research laboratory in the central chamber. If we can reach it, we might find a way to stabilize and complete your essence integration." "Complete it, what does that mean?" "According to these records, the final stage of cross-species essence bonding is full synchronization, a permanent merger that can't be extracted or separated." Sirax's expression was solemn. "You would forever be part Tyron, and the essence would forever carry human characteristics." The implications were staggering. "Would I still be me?" Yes, but more, Sarax replied, and the essence would be forever changed as well. Neither fully human nor Tyron, but something unprecedented. Another sound reached them, the metallic clang of the outpost's airlock being forced open. Varex's forces had arrived. We need to move. Cyrex urged, downloading crucial data to a portable device. The laboratory is 3 levels down. They navigated through the abandoned facility, moving as quietly as possible through corridors designed for Tyran physiology. Frank felt the essence guiding him, enhancing his stealth and awareness. He could sense the presence of Varex's guards, spreading through the upper levels, coordinating their search pattern with military precision. The central laboratory was a cavernous chamber dominated by equipment Frank couldn't begin to identify. Transparent cylinders lined the walls, each large enough to contain a Tyrone warrior connected to a central processing system. At the room's center stood a singular unit distinct from the others, newer, more advanced, its design incorporating elements that appeared almost ceremonial alongside the scientific. The synchronization chamber. Cyrex identified it, approaching the unit with reverence. Designed specifically for controlled essence evolution. Frank studied the chamber, feeling the essence within him responding to its proximity. This is what your father was working toward, a way to direct essence evolution rather than merely preserve it in its original state. Yes, radical thinking that the council condemned as heresy. Cyrax activated the chamber's systems, which hummed to life despite decades of disuse. But his research was sound. The essence has always had potential beyond what our traditions allowed. The sound of approaching guards echoed from the corridor outside. Frank turned toward the entrance, preparing for confrontation, but Cyrax caught his arm. "There's no time for fighting," she said urgently. "The synchronization process requires several minutes to complete. If you're going to do this, it must be now." Frank looked between the chamber and the doorway. "What about you?" "I'll hold them off," she replied, drawing a weapon from her uniform. "My father won't order lethal force against me immediately. It will buy you time." The essence pulsed strongly within Frank, conveying something beyond words. A certainty that this moment was pivotal, that the chamber represented not just survival, but fulfillment of something set in motion decades ago. "There has to be another way," he insisted. "Frank Sullivan." Cyrax said, her alien features somehow expressing emotions he could clearly recognize. "You and I both know that some battles cannot be won through combat alone. Sometimes transformation is the only victory possible." Before he could respond further, the laboratory doors began to open. Cyrax moved quickly, sealing Frank inside the synchronization chamber and activating its sequence. The transparent walls closed around him, and the essence within his body responded immediately. The luminescent patterns brightening to painful intensity, extending outward to connect with the chamber's internal mechanisms. Through the transparent barrier, Frank watched as Cyrex positioned herself between the chamber and the entrance, weapon raised. General Varix himself entered first, flanked by elite guards. The general halted at the sight of Frank in the synchronization chamber, recognition and alarm crossing his alien features. "What have you done?" Varix demanded of his daughter. "That chamber was designed for controlled evolution, not spontaneous synchronization." "I've done what you once believed in, Father," Cyrax replied, her weapon unwavering. "Allowed the essence to fulfill its potential beyond our limited understanding." Inside the chamber, Frank felt the synchronization process accelerating. The essence flowed through every cell in his body, no longer a separate entity, but merging with his very DNA. Knowledge, memories, and abilities, not his own, integrated with his consciousness. The lifetime experience of a Tyrone warrior blending with his human perspective. Pain and ecstasy intertwined as his physiology transformed at the molecular level. Through it all, he maintained awareness of the confrontation outside the chamber. Varix signaled his guards to surround Cyrax, who refused to yield. "The process cannot be reversed once completed," Varix warned, his voice tight with controlled fury. "He will be neither human nor Tyrone, an abomination our society will never accept." "Perhaps our society needs to evolve as well," Cyrax countered. "The essence has been guiding us for millennia. Have we considered that this transformation might be its intended path?" The synchronization reached a critical threshold. Frank's consciousness expanded beyond normal parameters, connecting not just with the chamber, but with the essence's original memories. He saw flashes of ancient Tyrone history, great battles in civilizations, rising and falling, the development of essence technology as a means to preserve their greatest minds across generations. And he understood with sudden clarity that Varix had been both right and wrong. The essence was indeed meant to evolve beyond a single species, not as a means of conquest, but as a bridge between civilizations, a way to transcend the limitations of biological mortality and isolation. The chamber systems reached peak capacity. Energy cascaded through the connections, the final phase of synchronization commencing. Frank's body arched as the essence fully integrated with every aspect of his being. The luminescent patterns stabilized, no longer flowing beneath his skin, but becoming part of his cellular structure. A permanent merger of human and Tyron biology. Outside, the standoff between Cyrax and her father reached its breaking point. Varix gave a signal, and his guards moved to restrain her. She fought with the skill of an elite warrior, but against overwhelming numbers, even her prowess had limits. Enough, Varix commanded, as his guards finally secured her. You've betrayed everything we stand for, daughter. The council will decide your fate alongside that of the human abomination. The synchronization chamber powered down, its purpose fulfilled. The transparent barriers retracted, releasing Frank into the laboratory atmosphere. He stepped forward, changed in ways visible, even to casual observation. His physiology remained primarily human, but the luminescent patterns were now permanent features of his skin, glowing with steady blue-white light. His eyes had changed as well, the irises now containing the same luminescence, giving them an otherworldly quality. More significant were the changes unseen. Enhanced strength, accelerated healing, and access to knowledge and abilities previously foreign to human experience. He stood taller, moved with fluid precision, and carried himself with the integrated confidence of two warrior traditions. Varix stared at the transformed Frank, with a mixture of scientific fascination and deep revulsion. What have you become? What the essence always intended. Frank replied, his voice carrying new resonance. Not a vessel for preservation, but a catalyst for evolution. The next step in a journey your ancestors began millennia ago. He moved towards Cyrax, the guards restraining her, tensing at his approach. With measured movements, Frank reached out and touched the nearest guard's arm. Instantly, a connection formed. Essence, recognizing essence, even dormant within Tyron physiology. The guard froze, experiencing something beyond his training or understanding. The essence speaks through me now, Frank explained, addressing not just Varix but all Tyrons present. It carries memories and knowledge from your greatest warriors preserved across generations. And it has chosen this path: integration, evolution, transcendence beyond a single form. One by one, and he established the same connection with each guard, sharing through direct essence contact what could never be conveyed through words alone. The guards released Cyrax, stepping back in confusion and wonder. This is heresy, Varix insisted, though his conviction seemed to waver. The council will never accept such deviation from sacred tradition. Then perhaps it's time the council learned what the essence truly desires, Frank suggested. Not stagnation in the name of purity, but growth through diversity, the very principle that once drove your own research general. Strax moved to Frank's side, studying his transformed appearance with wonder rather than revulsion. The synchronization is complete, she observed. How do you feel? Whole, Frank answered simply, as if pieces that were always meant to fit together have finally found their place. He turned his attention back to Varix. Your daughter showed more courage and vision than you, General. She recognized what you once knew but later denied. That evolution requires risk change and sometimes leaps into the unknown. Varix's posture shifted subtly, the body language of someone reassessing a battlefield that had changed unexpectedly. Even if what you say is true, the council will never permit this knowledge to spread. They will isolate you, study you, and ultimately destroy you to maintain order. Unless they see the truth for themselves, Cyrax suggested. The essence in its synchronized form can communicate directly, can it not? Without interference or interpretation. Frank nodded, understanding immediately. A direct appeal to the High Council, essence to essence, bypassing politics and prejudice. Impossible, Varix dismissed. The council chambers are the most secure location on Tyron. You would never reach them. We don't need to, Frank replied, moving toward the laboratory's central terminal. This facility was designed to research essence communication across distances. The equipment here can be modified to broadcast essence resonance patterns planet-wide. Cyrax joined him at the terminal, her technical knowledge complementing his essence-derived understanding. Together, they began reconfiguring the abandoned systems, repurposing decades-old technology for a purpose its creators had never envisioned. Varix watched them work his initial outrage, giving way to calculated observation. "You intend to force enlightenment upon an entire civilization," he noted. "Some might call that its own form of tyranny. We intend to remove the barriers that prevent truth from being recognized." Frank corrected, his hands moving with certainty across controls designed for tyrant physiology. What each individual does with that truth remains their choice. As they worked, Frank became aware of a shift in Varric's demeanor. Not surrender, but the pragmatic reassessment of a lifetime military commander. The general approach, slowly keeping a respectful distance from the transformed human. "The essence has truly accepted you," Varix acknowledged reluctantly. "Centuries of tradition insisted this was impossible, yet the evidence stands before me." He turned to his daughter. "And you, Cyrax, you saw this potential when I had become blind to it." "I simply respected the essence's choice, Father," she replied, "as you once taught me to do before politics corrupted your vision." Varix considered this, mandibles clicking in thoughtful contemplation. Finally, he came to a decision. "The broadcast you're preparing, it will reach the High Council, but also every citizen on Tyron. The consequences will be unpredictable." "Change always is," Frank replied, "but necessary nonetheless." After a moment's hesitation, Varix moved to a separate terminal. "The facility's transmission range is limited by power constraints. However, if we link to the military emergency broadcast network." His hands moved across the controls, inputting authorization codes that had never been revoked. "The reach would be planet-wide, perhaps even extending to nearby colonies." Cyrax exchanged a surprised glance with Frank. "You're helping us." "I am helping the essence fulfill its purpose," Varix corrected, though there was new uncertainty in his voice. "Whether that aligns with your intentions remains to be seen." With Varric's assistance, the modifications progressed rapidly. Frank connected himself to the broadcast system, the essence within him recognizing its new purpose and adapting accordingly. The luminescent patterns across his skin brightened as he prepared to channel something never before attempted, a direct essence communication to an entire civilization. "It's ready," Cyrax announced, finalizing the calibrations. "Planetary broadcast capabilities achieved. Essence resonance patterns stabilized for transmission." Frank positioned himself at the center of the modified transmission array. "What should I expect?" "Your consciousness will be projected alongside the essence resonance," Varix explained. "Every Tyran with even trace amounts of essence in their biology, which includes all citizens of significant rank, will experience a direct connection. They will see through your eyes, feel through your understanding. It will be intimate." Frank took a deep breath, centering himself. The synchronized essence responded, preparing for this final challenge. "Then let's show them what true evolution looks like." Cyrax activated the sequence. Energy coursed through the transmission array, connecting with the luminescent patterns in Frank's transformed physiology. His consciousness expanded exponentially, no longer confined to a single perspective, but spreading outward like ripples in a vast ocean. Suddenly, he was connected to thousands, then millions of minds, each distinctly Tyran, yet recognizably conscious in ways that transcended species. He felt their initial shock and resistance, followed by curiosity and wonder, as the synchronized essence shared its journey from Earth to this moment of transcendence. Through this unprecedented connection, Frank conveyed not just information, but experience. The essence's choice to bond with him, the healing connection with Cyrax, the synchronization that created something beyond either human or Tyron. He showed them memories from his human life alongside ancient Tyran history, preserved in the essence, demonstrating how the two perspectives enhanced rather than diminished each other. Most importantly, he shared the essence's own desire, not to remain static and preserved, but to grow, evolve, and build bridges between civilizations. This was its purpose from the beginning, a truth obscured by centuries of tradition and fear. The connection lasted only minutes, but its impact would endure for generations. As the transmission ended, Frank returned to normal consciousness, physically exhausted, but spiritually renewed. Cyrex supported him as the equipment powered down the facility, falling quiet once more. "It's done," she said softly. "For better or worse, the truth has been shared." Varric stood silent, his expression unreadable. Finally, he activated a communication device. "General Varric to Central Command. Stand down all pursuit operations. Prepare for my return with 2 diplomatic envoys." Frank looked at him questioningly. "The High Council is convening an emergency session," Varric explained. "They are requesting your presence, both of you." "Requesting," Cyrax repeated skeptically, "not demanding." "The transmission has had an immediate effect," her father admitted. "Many on the council experienced the Essence connection personally. Their perspective has been altered." Frank sensed there was more. "And what about you, General? Has your perspective been altered as well?" Varric studied him with those alien eyes that somehow now seemed less foreign. "I have served Tyron for 7 decades, dedicated to preserving our traditions and ensuring our survival. To discover that I may have been both right and wrong in my original hypothesis is challenging." "Growth usually is," Frank observed. "Indeed." Varric straightened to his full height, military bearing, reasserting itself. "The path ahead will not be easy. Many will resist change, cling to tradition. The Essence has initiated transformation, but it will require guidance to reach its full potential." Cyrax moved closer to Frank, their shared experience, creating a bond beyond easy categorization. "Then we will provide that guidance together, human Tyron, and whatever lies beyond those definitions." As they prepared to depart the asteroid outpost, Frank felt the synchronized Essence settle into a new rhythm within him. No longer separate, but truly integrated, neither fully human nor Tyron, but something unprecedented. A bridge between worlds, the first of what might become many. The old warrior had found his final and most important battle, not one fought with weapons or tactics, but with understanding and evolution. A battle not for survival alone, but for transformation, for transcendence beyond the limitations of a single form or perspective. And as their vessel departed for Tyron, carrying its unique cargo of possibility, Frank Sullivan knew with certainty that this was not an ending, but the first step in a journey that would ultimately lead him home, to an Earth that would need to understand what humanity might become when it finally embraced the stars and all they contained.